I think too often now we see on the internet, and other sort of digital connected spaces, basically being all part of the network, that are just old ways to exploit and do and restrict access to money, right? So we see a lot of people making money on the internet now, but they're using tactics and exploitation that has been going on for hundreds of years across different media. In terms of open payments, is how do you take some of both the technology and the thinking around the open web and the internet as it's evolved, both and try to do the same level of change, technical and social, for value, for money, for how people can transact their lives, that takes advantage of the affordances of the digital world. So that's, to us, the internet of opportunity. Is then now how do you link these financial systems, everything from small co-ops to central banks, to having open payment rails all over the place, so that all kinds of different settlement layers can connect with and transact with. So projects like Chimoney, Wallet Guru, People's Clearinghouse. These are projects that have been with us for now 2 to 3 years, and we've developed through multiple grants. What we're positing as kind of a big view is that if the Interledger protocol, as a piece of open source technology that is not for profit, can be used by all, is looking to connect systems together. I mean, that's what the protocol does. It's a messaging protocol for the exchange of value on the internet.
What's the one thing that you hope everyone who attends the summit this year walks away with?
I want them to walk away feeling like there's real progress being made. From a summit to summit perspective, that is really important for us, right? That we see the sophistication, the connectivity of the community, of the ideas, of the projects, of the people expand from year to year. Actually, if I had to pick my number one, see, I talked myself into one, then I would say that everyone walks away with a new potential colleague and somebody that they're excited to continue to think and plan with.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Fintech Forum powered by Chimoney, where we bring you conversations on the future of payments, innovation, and financial inclusion. I am your host, Phylis, and today I'm really excited because we're joined by someone whose work has not only shaped open tech and digital inclusion, but is also driving a global vision for interoperable payments. Our guest today is Chris Lawrence, and Chris' career spans across education, open technology, and community innovation. He started out shaping STEM and digital learning programs in New York, and later on went on to serve as the vice president at Mozilla, where he helped grow global movements around digital literacy and the open internet. He later co-founded Loop Design and Innovation before joining Grant for the Web to support open web monetization projects. Since 2020, Chris has been at the Interledger Foundation, moving from leading programs to now guiding his global vision as the Chief Program Officer. Welcome to this episode, Chris. It's so nice to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Phyllis. I'm going to need you to send me the copy on that bio. I think I'm going to use that as my new bio. So thank you.
Consider it done after this. Awesome. So I would love to start with your journey. You've spent years in education, open tech, and digital inclusion, from Mozilla to co-founding your own innovation consultancy, and now leading programs at Interledger, right? What pulled you into this intersection of open technology and financial inclusion?
Yeah, it has been even hearing you read my bio there, it has been a bit of a weird journey, right? So I think the common thread amongst all of that is one, that a broad definition of public education, right? Like we need informed citizens. We need an informed populace. The smarter we are as a people, as a community, as nation states, as any way you define that, the more thoughtful, more intelligent we can be, the better. So whether it's education in the strictest sense, and being in classrooms or working in spaces that are explicitly for education, all the way up to understanding that the general public needs education. I've often been inspired by the story of science literacy. Have you ever heard about this? So I'll tell the story real quick, if that's okay. So science literacy was an idea that started in the 1960s and 70s, basically, which was that the world is getting more and more scientifically complex as we understand more of the world around us, right? And that means that the general population's knowledge of a certain base level of science or an understanding of how science works, not necessarily the collection of facts, but the scientific process, exploration, integrating new ideas and new observations in the scientific world, new scientific facts, and being able to make sense of the world that way, right? And so they came up with this movement of science literacy, which was not about getting more people to be chemists or astrophysicists. It was to raise the level of knowledge of the general public. So I've always had that driving force. I think that's what connects me to any versions of this work that you mentioned there. But I think in terms of open payments, is how do you take some of both the technology and the thinking around the open web and the internet as it's evolved, both and try to do the same level of change, technical and social, for value, for money, for how people can transact their lives, that takes advantage of the affordances of the digital world. I think too often now we see on the internet, and other sort of digital connected spaces, that basically being all part of the network, that are just old ways to exploit and do and restrict access to money, right? So we see a lot of people making money on the internet now, but they're using tactics and exploitation that has been going on for hundreds of years across different mediums, everywhere from the telegraph to newspapers. So from a historical perspective, you want to make sure that as this technology evolves, there's at least an active voice about building it ethically, and to build with to be thoughtful and to build the most inclusive version of the things that we get, both from the technical infrastructure driven by the Interledger protocol and to that wider understanding about how our finance system needs to evolve.
Interesting. And so when what Interledger does is to fund the technology that is powering this. And I believe it's not only investing in the people, but also investing in the community and helping to build digital skills, supporting local innovators, and creating the conditions where financial inclusion can really take root. So now moving to the open source bit of it, I believe that Interledger is using open source as a key part in not only improving innovation, but also making the systems transparent. So what are the projects that you are supporting currently that are using the open source technology, and specifically in Africa or maybe in Latin America and beyond? So what are some of the projects that you're supporting that is using this ethos to kind of build on the Interledger technology?
Well, we have a number of things. So much of this is driven through our grant making, right? So we have a grant program called the Digital Financial Services. Excuse me, I have a little cold, so if I cough or I apologize.
Yes.
So we have a grant stream called Digital Financial Services, and within that grant stream, we fund innovation within the open payment space. And so we've been through, I believe, 4 rounds of grant making there. So projects like Chimoney, Wallet Guru, People's Clearinghouse, these are projects that have been with us for now 2 to 3 years, and we've developed through multiple grants. And we start with all 3 of those projects, whether that is cross-border payments between migrant workers in the United States to the home community financial system back in Mexico, whether that's the Chimoney wallet looking to connect and peer and be able to send money cross borders to a growing list of countries, or whether it's Wallet Guru, a project that is looking to experiment in the world of streaming video about what pay-as-you-go utilities might work and look like with Interledger protocol at part of its core technology stack. So those are examples of projects that have been with us and that we funded over a number of cycles. But we also are just in the process now of reviewing a whole new batch of applications. We got, I think, something like almost 70 applications for this latest round of the digital financial services, and it's a long and hard process to get to just a handful and 2, 3, 4 projects that might get funded through that. So that's a major way. We also do things like strategic partnerships where we build relationships with companies or individuals or pieces of technology that need to be part of that larger ecosystem. So we're partnering with a feature phone and operating system and hardware to look at how could Interledger be part of point of sale opportunities that are on that phone, or what would an Interledger based wallet that comes on the feature phone. So and that was done through a strategic partnership grant. So we have a number of avenues. We're also making what's something called a public interest loan, a PRI loan. That is basically loans for innovative work, where then Interledger has a piece of that company if and when they become successful, but at much lower terms and agreements than what would typically be in a venture capital type of arrangement.
Interesting. And in all of this, so as you're funding startups, as you're creating relationships with regulators, schools, what is the grand vision for how Interledger? So basically, how does Interledger envision the adoption of open payments? Basically, what the end goal is through all these initiatives that you guys are taking part in.
That's a good question, right? And so I think we're always exploring versions of what that answer is and might be. I think, we've been kind of coalescing some of our thinking around this idea of the Internet of Opportunity. Mm-hmm. So, and we have some data and some facts and figures and some research, but most people know about the growth of the internet and how it started to connect and disrupt and all of the story of the internet over the last 30 years. And a big piece of that throughout that was connectivity, right? You had to be connected to more people, more, so on and so forth. So the sort of growth at scale on hyperspeed of the internet. But how money moves, how value moves, how we transact, how we even think about new ways of transaction enabled by the internet have lagged behind that innovation. And so what we're positing as kind of a big view is that if Interledger protocol as a piece of open source technology that is not for profit, can be used by all, is looking to connect systems together. I mean, that's what the protocol does. It's a messaging protocol for the exchange of value on the internet, right? So that's easy to say, but it's kind of a radical concept, right? This idea that the team of Stefan Thomas and Evan Schwartz and their team at the time at Ripple put together is a pretty, how do you move value, money as packets on the internet? So at its core, that is a way to expand the open capabilities of the internet itself. And so how can we have more web-driven, more digitally enabled ways in which we connect that larger financial system? So that's to us the Internet of Opportunity is then now how do you link these financial systems? Everything from small co-ops to central banks to having open payment rails all over the place so that all kinds of different settlement layers can connect with and transact with. So how do you build those? How do you build those highways? How do you build that infrastructure to allow that to happen? So I think the big vision is that of Interledger is that we would have expanded that Internet of Opportunity, that sort of next wave of the internet that was open payments based and had different ways and both policy, regulation, but also conceptual thinking and actual practices that are evolved from those new affordances.
Interesting, and I think that's really key, because as even your the benefits that comes as a result of what Interledger is doing, there's also the bit where it helps to improve access to money for the people that are considered underbanked, or the ones that are often used. So as these technologies are being created, innovated, they also get to tap into the digital financial inclusion system. So I think that's a key thing that comes up as even Interledger is powering these initiatives and technologies. So I wanted to ask about how Interledger is thinking of interoperability in all of this, because the protocol allows payments across different payment networks. And so that is key in achieving interoperability. And so are there any specific sectors that you are looking at when you're aiming for interoperability, or are there any specific sectors you're even working with right now to ensure that this happens within your ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the big, to stay at the 10,000 foot view for a second, I think part of the big idea is that I'm going to do this all. Sorry, I'm going to do this the whole time. I'm going to get Interledger and Internet mixed up. So my apologies right now. But if you look at what the Interledger protocol does at its core, is it actually allows the linking of different providers, different payment options, different, to connect with other settlement options. And so one thing that Open Payments does, enabled by Interledger protocol, is that it allows for greater competition and variety and concepts of what is the settlement layer on that side. And so, and we are hoping that protocol-enabled open payment solutions, or even open payment solutions beyond the protocol, or where the protocol might have inspired or is a part of, but they become bigger, is that you actually raise up the demand for that variety in settlement layer, for that variety in places and how people transact, which then at that point can be much more locally defined. And one thing that we believe about at Interledger about interoperability is that it has to be that when we think about those things local, what's going to work from the local, what is regulation of the local is going to be able to be what works best, right? Because the people that need the services, that want the services, should be the ones designing the services and participating and leading the services. So if we can expand the definition even about, what happens at the settlement layer, or what is a bank in the 21st century? What is a bank in a world where open payments are a viable way to move money? You start to get new concepts of what that might be. And if we can push at Interledger, if we can push on the technology, the public, the public understanding of the big ideas and why we should be looking for new options, as well as the regulatory environment that actually understands them and is regulating in a safe and consistent way to both embrace and watchdog these innovations. We're kind of pushing on all three of those aspects.
Awesome. And you've mentioned powering local solutions, and so you have funded some companies that are powering local solutions, like People's Clearinghouse. Would you want to talk about how that specific solution or other solutions that you have powered that are locally being locally innovated, and how it fits into your global vision as Interledger?
I think maybe I will accept your invitation to talk about People's Clearinghouse here, because I think it's one of the more dynamic stories around this idea. And that is that the protocol and even Interledger as a foundation can't invent fund, create, help support all aspects of this broader ecosystem, right? Because we're talking about the globe, we're talking about almost a mind-bending degree of players, of governments, of regulation, of technology, right? That's a large problem set. So to come and be able to say, hey, I think the protocol, both technically and conceptually, can link together these 3 or 4 existing efforts, regulators, communities, people who need service, then you can start to build these pathways easier. So People's Clearinghouse came with a network of 200 plus community co-op microbanks across Mexico. They were, and they also, those microbanks had already established relationships with the communities, with the farmers co-ops. And so they were already, and they had the trust, and often were, the staff is made up of local people, the cousins and the aunts and the uncles and the daughters and the sons of the community. So you already had that, right? Think about how much work that is, right? The social trust, the building of these systems, the sort of social activism work that had taken this woman, Isabel Cruz, 25, 30 years to put together. So, and they had then those existing relationships with the greater Mexican finance system. But I'll pause there for a second and say, so you had those elements in place. So that made it much easier to build something on top of that existing network, right? Networks are best when they connect and expand, not when you build them separately from each other. So so they were presenting a scheme that would leverage and build upon existing successful networks and communities and systems in that space. They also needed help because even though they had done all of that work around these distributed microbanks and so on and so forth, they were still not fully in the Mexican system. And so our technology would not only help them connect to their community members who are working abroad, but it also would help walk them to the larger Mexican financial system, which is best represented in a quick conversation as by saying, being underneath the regulatory and environment of the Mexican central bank. So this is, so they're in the process of putting their paperwork and presenting to the Mexican central bank, which would then connect that distributed network of community banks into the central financial system of Mexico, and really start to allow those micro institutions to have much more financial access and power and bring in more wealth to those communities. And the real goal of the project, quite frankly, is that in 5, 10, 15 years, you don't need as many people migrating from these communities, that it's viable to stay in these communities, right? And so how do you use that development fund basically by bringing in liquidity to these community banks? How does that have a community development aspect over years and decades? There's just been some research done by UCLA and Oxford and some others where they called this, moving from the vicious circle to the virtuous circle, right? These remittance pathways can often be very predatory, cost a lot of money, and also then they just go into somebody's pocket. They're not doing it, and it gets spent more quickly. There's no concept of savings or development or community, right? So how do you move that? What most research over the decades has said that these can be a lot of harmful patterns in remittances. So but the circle exists. So how do you make that circle more virtuous?
Interesting. And I think something that's coming up constantly is the power of partnerships in all of this, not only in the way Interledger powers the projects, but also the projects rely a lot on partnerships, whether locally or globally, in order to fully create whatever solution they're building wholesomely, which I think is great. That now leads me the whole concept of partnerships, and also the fact that we use an example of a Mexican project. it now brings me into the Interledger Summit that's coming up next month in Mexico, which we are so excited about, especially at Chimoney. And the Interledger Summit has become such a key gathering for the community. What is the vision for this year's summit?
Well, the vision for this year's summit, I think, is a couple of visions, right? All feeding into our broader vision of digital financial inclusion and expanding the internet of opportunity. But here's where a couple of those maybe sub-themes are. One, it's actually an anniversary for Interledger two ways. One, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of basically the creation of the Interledger protocol itself. So the Interledger protocol is having a 10-year birthday at the summit. And the Interledger Foundation, as a nonprofit foundation that stewards that protocol and looks to advance it, integrate it, build upon it, and build the world of digital financial inclusion that the protocol can be a part of, is 5 years old. So the protocol is having its 10th birthday, and the foundation is having its 5th birthday. So if I could just take a second to talk about ourselves here, that's a theme, right? And so it's a kind of a moment to celebrate those moments, so to speak. Other than that, I think it really is, how is the Mexico People's Clearinghouse project, and then all of the partnerships and communities and ecosystems that is activated, how is that, like, the summit become almost like a living case study for that work? And so it's not, most of the program is still not driven all by the Mexican projects and people, although it's going to be significant contribution. But also, how do those ideas interact with what we're doing globally? How do those global ideas intermingle? So I think we're going to be having a reception where you're going to meet some of the local producers and use some of the People's Clearinghouse technology to possibly purchase some of those materials, or in some way I will have those microbanks on site who will talk about their work. We're debuting a film that we did about this work called The People's Clearinghouse. The People's Code. We're to be debuting that movie, but we're also going to be bringing in people from around the globe to talk about digital financial inclusion issues. So I think the second theme that I would say is that it's a bit of a living case study. People are going to come, they're going to learn, they're going to share, and we're going to kind of see this case study in action. And then I think the next theme, which is always the theme, a persistent theme of the Interledger Summit, is that we're a completely distributed team. This work is global. Our projects are distributed. It's really important for us to bring people together. And we do that mainly, but not exclusively, through the summit. But the summit is our big moment in time to bring the active grantees, communities, partners, co-developers, curious folks into a room together, into a space together to think and learn and bond. Because what happens at the summit in terms of those relationships really does have an impact on the work. We've been doing this long enough at Interledger, and I've been doing this long enough in my career to know that those things matter.
Interesting. And apart from the fact that that the Interledger has like existing grantees in Mexico, was there a particular reason you chose Mexico? Because I think Mexico comes up a lot when people talk about like the people that are secluded in financial inclusion. So was that part of the reason you chose Mexico as a location for this year's summit? Just curious.
I think it was, well, yes and no. I think the more specific reason was because of the work with People's Clearinghouse and the work that we've done over the last couple of years in partnership with them, and our growing interest and connection to Central and Latin America. And I think the Americas, quite frankly, everything from northmost Canada down to the southern tip of South America is is an area of interest for Interledger Foundation, and especially Central and Latin America and the Caribbean. So, and this project work had allowed us to get to know and meet and build. We were participated in Finno Summit and co-sponsored some research with them, and having other relationships within the state of Mexico, the country of Mexico, excuse me. So that was a main reason, but we also like to move around and quite frankly, Mexico City is a very exciting, and Mexico at large is very exciting in fintech. There's a lot of interesting things happening. It's a very vibrant community already. So it's, a international hub of all kinds of activity. So also there's just as a global city and one on the rise, quite frankly, it's also just good to be in those spaces.
Awesome. And so what I'm getting about the conference this year is that it's going to be a place where, just like it has been in the previous years, this year it's still a place where innovators, communities come together to align on what's next for open and inclusive payments, powered by Interledger, which is, I think, I want to be at the summit this year, but I wish I was, because of how, like the content we've been seeing around it this year. It's so strong and it's catching up on everyone. So, for the people who are going to be at the Interledger Summit, we believe it's going to be a powerful opportunity for them to plug into. Now, what's the one thing that you hope everyone who attends the summit this year walks away with?
That's a good question, because it's hard for me to pick one.
You can say all of them.
Well, no, I know enough about how education works that people usually, if you want, the main thing you want them to get, they'll probably learn. The second thing is, if they do, great. The third thing, you have no chance. So, I'll give you two. So, one, I'd want everyone to walk away being able, especially if they've been involved in the community for a few years or curious, or even in the larger digital financial inclusion space, even not within Interledger, I want them to walk away feeling like there's real progress being made, right? Like there are pilots rolling out, the demos are becoming more useful and ready for testing. There's a more cohesive sense of the community, right? So I want people to just leave with an understanding of progress, and go from there. So that from a summit to summit perspective, that is really important for us, right? That we see the sophistication, the connectivity of the community, of the ideas, of the projects, of the people expand from year to year. And then the second is, what I really want from a design of the summit perspective that everyone walk away with is a new potential colleague or connection. Because that is the most important thing, right? So, we can do this for each other's projects. We can collaborate here. We can, whatever that might be. So actually, if I had to pick my number one, I talked myself into one, then I would say that everyone walks away with a new potential colleague and somebody that they're excited to continue to think and plan with.
Interesting. And I think from our previous participations in the Interledger Summit as Chimoney, we've gotten so many collaborations. So that will definitely happen this year, and I think that's something really nice to look forward to. And so as we wrap up, this is more of like a looking ahead kind of question. So if we move forward to the next 5 years at Interledger, what's the vision for financial inclusion? And even what do you hope to have achieved at that moment? It doesn't need to be exact, but is there something you're looking at in the next 5 years that when you finally reach that moment, you'll be like, we are truly impressed with the work we are doing, and we are seeing how it is impacting the lives of the people that are part of our ecosystem?
So I think at the sort of mission level, we would want to see that our efforts were contributing to more successful long-term outcomes for people, right? Especially within financial inclusion. So if we can see for ourselves and have other acknowledge that the work that we've done on all of our fronts has helped in the effort to expand what digital financial inclusion can be, right? So whether that's through laws or technology or regulation or successful projects, through amounts, the size of the connectivity of the protocol across systems, so on and so forth. But that's the big idea, is that we can say, hey, we can tell that how our efforts aided a larger global effort, because that's what it takes, right? Is a larger global effort, which we're a part of. So that's one. I'd say a little bit more practically, and how we would start to see how, if that was true or not, is in 5 years, I'd say, give you a very specific example. The UN is going to be updating their sustainability goals in 2030. That's when they come up for review and sort of rewriting and recommitting to so. We would like to have a voice at those tables. We would like the work that we do to have where relevant, obviously, but within, how financial rights are human rights, how financial access and financial systems that are built on inclusion and equity and are including more people need to be a metric that we look at. We want to be helping to influence in a variety of ways, through participating, through the efforts of our grantees, through the efforts of the research we sponsor, through the efficacy of our work. So how are we strategically influencing the things in which we measure what we're trying to aid in accomplishing? So that's one strategy, right? So our strategic influence. A second one is obviously, adoption and growth. Where can you find the protocol? How many systems and technology stacks and payment schemes is it a part of? Is it helping to drive? Is there a open payments rail driven by Interledger in a major payment provider? Right. So, how much money is flowing through, Interledger enabled rails? How many nodes in the network? How many, so those kind of things, how many integrations? What's the adoption and growth, and what then makes the protocol essential as part of that evolving open payments technology stack? And then third is, how are we building a dynamic pipeline of creativity and talent into this space? So this is a growing space, right? And this is going to be, whether you want to call it fintech or open payments or, even, any way you want to define or talk about or classify the move in digital finance. We're going to need talent. We're going to need developers. We're going to need programmers. We're going to need communication specialists. We're going to need lawyers. We're going to need designers. We're going to need, so through our university partnerships, we're also looking to build, what's the talent pipeline? How do you reach undergrad and graduate students early enough to put these careers, to put these issue areas, to excite them into careers next? We think this is a growth, there's a lot of growth in these industries and a lot of exciting opportunities. So it's also about how do we not go to your typical, universities, your big Western universities or American universities. How do you go to universities and communities that aren't normally served in these kind of big academic partnerships? So I'd say those are the areas that we're focusing on, but still, to that big idea is, can we be part of the solution? So when something like the World Bank's FinDeck comes out, which the latest version I think just came out just a couple months ago, maybe in July. It is excellent, and it is just this is basically the state. It's the World Bank state of digital financial inclusion, or even just financial inclusion broadly across the globe. And they do that, I think, every 2 to 3 years. I might be wrong on a few details, but it just came out, and you could see, I would, when that comes out in another 2 or 3 years, you'd like to be able to draw a direct line between the work that I've described that Interledger is doing and a positive momentum and outcomes in their report.
Awesome. That's so inspiring. And it's also a call to action, because this work just doesn't happen in isolation. It's the contributors, the grassroots leaders, the innovators, and the partners, as you've mentioned, all working together to make sure that financial equity is reached at some point. And specifically at Chimoney, we're very privileged to be part of this journey and also applying the open protocols to make global payments more inclusive. Now, for the normal person or just someone listening to this, how would you urge them to get connected with Interledger, or to basically get connected with the work you're doing in the capacity they're able to? What's your urge to them?
So I'd say here's some concrete things that I think people could do. If any part of what I said or the work that Interledger is doing is interesting to you, and for whatever reason. One, I say sign up for our newsletter. It's only once a month. We don't spam, and it's a good update and recap of what's going on. So it's a very easy way to stay connected. Secondly, we do monthly community calls. I would highly recommend joining the community calls. We have community share outs. We have deep dives into different projects. We do monthly updates about what's going on at Interledger. And it's live. It's also recorded. We also release it as a podcast. So, the monthly community calls are an excellent way. And we also do some other events throughout the year that are sort of similar, using Zoom or Google Meet or something of that nature. So that's the second concrete thing. The third concrete is that if any of our grant streams and open grant opportunities are interesting to you, you can usually get when those open through the newsletter or the website. But, I would watch what the grants that we're making. We've done everything from arts and cultural grant making to, of course, the innovation grant making and the university grant making. We've done a call for papers. We've funded policy projects. So if that is interesting, or you think you have ideas that match those calls, that's another excellent way to get involved. Obviously, attending the summit, which is a little bit more high touch and can be expensive, obviously. But if you can, or that's another great way to stay connected. We also, if you're a developer, we're doing Hacktoberfest. I'm not sure when this podcast will come out, but probably there'll be some Hacktoberfest that's left. But we're on GitHub. All of our stuff is open source. And here's where I'll end. We have a great Slack community. And I say all the time, I think we have some of the most responsive developers in open tech, in open source, in terms of if you have a question about Rafiki, you can generally get it answered by the person or teams who are directly working on Rafiki every day. And so the combination of our community and also all kinds of other topics interaction, but our community Slack and our GitHub are great ways to start to get into the deeper parts of working with the technology. So there's many ways, in short.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So to our listeners, if you want to learn more, we encourage you to check out Interledger through the channels that Chris has mentioned. And Chris, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your vision, and giving us a glimpse into the impact that Interledger is making globally. And of course, to our listeners, once again, keep following Chimoney as we continue to build with Interledger to make global payments more inclusive. And as we wrap up, Chris, it's been such an honor having you here. And yeah, I wish you an awesome day ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and sorry for my sniffles.
We didn't hear them. I didn't hear them. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This has been the Fintech Forum powered by Chimoney. And until next time, let's keep building a world where payments are open, interoperable, and accessible for all. Bye, and thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.